In this lesson, we'll use the section tool to create a spline where the building is being sliced. Now, what we're looking at right now is where we left off at the end of lesson 5 when we had extracted all of these shapes and we had then taken these into AutoCAD. So I'm going to reveal my building now just by unhiding all the layers. I'm going to right click as well to unhide all, and that's going to show the building that was manually hidden when we had gone and extracted or only used the elements that we needed for this ground. I'm now going to hide the ground floor layer as well as create a new layer, which is going to be called the section layer, and this is the one that we're then going to export into AutoCAD in the following lessons. So anything I now create is now going to be added to this selected layer. If I now go into my left view, I can create that section element again, that section tool, and basically I can now look in the top view and I can go and move it into the correct position. Now, if you want to know exactly where this should be, all you need to do is select one of the elements that already has its gizmo or its axis on the actual X value, in our case, as the one that you wish to use. So all I'm going to do is highlight and copy using Control-C on the keyboard this X value, and then if I select that section object again, I can then just go and paste that value and hit enter. That's just going to align it exactly in the middle of this building tower so that everything is pretty much symmetrically organized around this section line. So what I'm doing right now, if I look in my perspective, is I can start to see what this section is already cutting through. So let's now, with the section selected, go across to that section itself, and let's choose to create a shape. And we can now select this shape and we can isolate it. And let's have a look again in our left view at what we're looking at. Now, already I can see certain reference elements which are pretty informative. We can see the building, the museum on the right. We can see the level of the water. We can see the plinth. This is the bridge, the entrance pavilion. We can see here where the central tower core is located, the actual timber lattice surrounding that core, as well as this bubble canopy, and as well we can see the outer extremities of the expo building. So the floor of the expo building is one up here, and what we will have below it is going to be that space frame. On the left we can see one half of the facade. I don't know if you had seen the previous course, but we had mentioned in that course that this is a double facade that is symmetrical on both sides, which means that for the purpose of the rendering, we had gone and hidden or deleted this inner surface of that double-sided facade just for that rendering purpose. But now we will need to remember to make this element symmetrical and basically work on it in AutoCAD. So as I mentioned, the space frame element is one thing that we are not necessarily seeing too clearly in this particular section because we're only cutting through a small portion of it. We need to actually gain more of that space frame in order to see its entire structure. So let's go and have a look at how we can extract this out of the building itself. So what I'm going to do is just choose the steel layer. I'm going to then go down to the correct layer, in other words the space frame layer, not the steel layer. Select all of the objects within the scene on that layer, right click isolate, and I'm going to view that in my top view. So just to show you quickly what I'm looking at, it's basically everything within that space frame layer showing me all of that structure. So I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to type Control-V, make a copy of it, and we can actually go and move everything off to the side because we're going to be working in section. I'm going to have these separate elements all aligned horizontally next to each other. So I can now choose to convert this to an editable poly. I can also isolate it out again. And the next thing I want to do is to just attach everything together so that this process is going to be a little bit easier. What essentially I want to do now is to extract out at least one or two of these modules out of this entire big structure, and we're then going to compress and flatten that into one object in AutoCAD in another lesson. So let's go ahead now and attach everything together. So we're going to click on Attach List. We're going to select all of the other objects, attach everything together, and we can now go and select all of the polys And let's just select an entire module here in the middle. You can then go and just reduce that selection ever so slightly. We don't need too much of it, but we just need enough so that we have at least one complete module selected. So I'm going to have a look whether this is enough. And this looks like it should suit our purposes. So once you're happy with that selection, you can then go and invert and delete the other objects that you don't need, and we can then go and isolate that out again. So this object is now one that we're going to be working with as a separate element, and I'm going to do exactly the same process to all the other elements that we are going to need to use as well. So for example, if this section of ours is cutting through the middle of this tower, and we're going to be looking in, let's say, this direction or this direction, we're going to want to see all of the other elements that are in the background just behind that section line. We're going to want to include all of that. So I'm going to do this in my own time before the next lesson, because it is going to be a repetition of exactly what we did here with the space frame, and that's all going to be handled for you. And I'm going to pause the video now while I do that, so that we can at least have a look at all of those separate elements before we go and export that out into AutoCAD. Now here I had gone and extracted out certain elements that we're going to be viewing when cutting through this building. So for example, these columns, these pavilion structures, this balustrade which we're going to see, or the handrail on the side of the bridge, and also the entire mesh which is on the top of this building here. Now I'm going to do one element in front of you so that you can see the process that was taken with some of the elements that are being cut through. For example, this tower here, if I just isolate it out so we know what we're looking at, I had basically attached all of the elements together. I had made a copy. In other words, this is not part of the original building. It's a copied version of a pre-selected area of the building. Now what I want to do in this case is I'm going to add a slice modifier onto this. And this is going to basically give me an opportunity to cut away half of it so that I only see the back half, which is what we're going to be viewing when we look at the section. So I'm going to now add a slice, and I'm going to right click and rotate the slice plane by 90 degrees. And if I move the slice plane, I now need to paste that value into 92.083, so that basically it is cutting through exactly the middle. Then if I choose to remove the top, it is basically going to remove everything outside of that section line. In other words, what is being shown, if I just move this to the side, is going to be the part of the tower that is actually going to be visible in the background behind the slice plane, behind the line that we are busy cutting through. So this is going to be an important element to go and show. So for example, if I have a look at that view, it is actually going to be the right view. So this is exactly what we're going to see in a hidden line format when we bring this across into AutoCAD. So you're going to see these stairs in the background, you're going to see this lattice, and you want to make sure that all of that detail is in place. So this is quite a vital element to keep in mind. So what we're going to do right now is take all of these elements and we're going to now extract them out. So let's go and select this spline, which is the major and long section that we're cutting through the building, and we're then going to select each of these elements as well, and let's just go and save all of that out by exporting and export selected. And we're going to go into our project files, reference files, and we're going to call this one 09. It's going to be a DWG again, and it's going to be extracted section. And I'm going to save that out. So next, in the next lesson, we're going to look at the AutoCAD steps, how to then process this extracted 3D geometry into a workable section that then starts looking like a proper flattened out section as you are accustomed to seeing in AutoCAD. So what we had covered in this lesson is really using the section tool, extracting out certain elements, using the slice tool like we had with this tower, and basically working with certain groups of parts which are going to be then all compressed into one view as we create that final section. So all of that is then going to happen in the next lesson, where we go and flatten everything together and compile it. So join me for that as we move into the AutoCAD step in the next lesson.